So this presentation is going to explore the fundamental processes of the nervous system, the functionality, focusing on sensation, integration, and motor response. We'll examine how sensory input is detected, processed, and translated into appropriate motor actions. We're going to start off with sensation. Sensation involves detecting stimuli from the environment or inside the body through specialized receptors which initiate neural signals sent to the nervous system for further processing. So this is all about the input. And so when we're talking about detection of stimuli, the nervous system detects various stimuli such as light, sound, temperature, and pressure through specialized sensory neurons that convert physical signals into electrical impulses. So we may have sensory neurons that are picking up different types of stimuli, and they're going to basically turn that stimuli into electrical impulses, which can travel through the nervous system. So the role and location of these receptors, obviously in terms of location, they're going to be distributed throughout the skin, the eyes, the internal organs. They function by responding to specific types of stimuli, enabling the body to perceive its surroundings. So if you think back, when we did the integumentary system, one of the things we did talk about was all those different touch receptors found in the integument, in the skin. And those would be sensory receptors that we were talking about, with all those different types of sensations they could get. So what do we mean when we say types of sensations? Well, like I was just talking about, we have our touch sensation. We also have pain, temperature, and proprioception. So these kind of give us different ways to interpret, to get senses, to get things into our body, sending them off to the brain. So that takes us to our integration. That's where we send them to the brain and spinal cord. So integration is about how the brain and spinal cord will process the incoming sensory information, will recognize patterns, make decisions, and form memories to help us generate appropriate responses. And that form memories is really actually kind of important, because that's why there's a lot of things that you couldn't do at one point, but now you can, because the system has remembered those inputs and remembered the responses. And we'll go into that a little bit. So how the brain and spinal cord are going to process the sensory information. The central nervous system receives sensory signals. It analyzes them. It prioritizes the response. Some things are more important than others in the situation. If a bear walks into the room, digesting your food might not be really important. Getting away from the bear, that might be a little more important. So this process is going to give us the ability, it enables us to make quick, accurate interpretations of stimuli. So our sensory signal reception, the brain and spinal cord are going to get that signal from all the different parts of the body. It really is almost like what this picture is showing, where we've got all these different wires, except the wires that are coming in are going to be nerves and neurons, and they don't really come in randomly all over the brain like the picture shows. We've seen they come in through nerves into the spinal cord, and some will come in up closer to the brain and everything, but you get the idea. And so then the signal is going to be analyzed. It's going to figure out what needs to be done, which one's more important than the other, and it will come up with this response coordination fairly quickly, accurately interpreting those stimuli so we can respond very quickly. And we know that the nervous system responds very quickly. You think, oh, I should go sharpen my pencil, and you really have put very little thought into the process before you're up and walking over to the pencil sharpener. So we said that there's this pattern recognition concept. So the central nervous system uses pattern recognition to interpret sensory data, enabling it to distinguish between familiar and novel stimuli and make informed decisions based on the context. So the sensory nervous system is going to interpret, and it uses pattern recognition. Is this similar to something it's seen before? Or is it going to be something unique? It distinguishes between familiar and new stimuli. If it's something that you deal with on a regular basis, your system, your brain, your central nervous system, often already knows how to respond or what's going to be the best response to that situation. Whereas new stimuli are going to maybe have to think about, it's going to have to process and go, oh, well, this might be a better response. So ultimately, we have informed decision making. It's not just randomly the signal comes in and it says, let's see, I think we're going to do this. It's going to use these things, the past experiences and things like that. That's why as you grow and as you experience more things, you can make better decisions. So within this sensory information, it's kind of compared to storing memories. It allows the nervous system to predict outcomes, choose best course of action. So the sensory information processing, nervous system is processing and interpreting and responding to this information more effectively. So when we're talking about the memory comparison, we've got these stored memories, and so we can compare the memories that are already there to the new data that comes in to look for those patterns and predict those outcomes. And so this gives us a little more experience, a little more background for those decision makings. It's not just a random guess. And this takes us to our third part, which is our motor response. Motor response involves transmitting signals from the central nervous system to muscles and glands, to our organs, whatever it is that's going to need to respond to this behavior. It results in a voluntary or involuntary action to interact with or adapt to the environment. So sometimes you think about the response and you know, oh, I'm going to do this, and sometimes it just happens. So motor neurons carry commands from the central nervous system to effectors, such as the skeletal muscles for movement, or it might be to glands for secretion, that enables the physical response and physiological regulation. So our motor neurons are all about transmitting from central nervous system to where the response needs to happen and kind of initiating the actions of the response. So if it comes into a muscle, like we were talking about in the last unit, it will activate that process that causes the skeletal muscle to contract. And so that's where the going from the synapse through the synaptic cleft into the muscle where we have the receivers, then will trigger that process that causes all of our thick and thin filaments to contract, to move across each other. If we're talking about it in terms of gland secretion, they're going to stimulate that gland to secrete whatever substance it normally is involved with, and that's going to actually help regulate a lot of physiological processes. So we know that voluntary responses are going to be consciously controlled. Involuntary responses are typically involve reflexes, autonomic functions that happen without a conscious effort. So that kind of ties back in when we talked about voluntary and involuntary in the muscles. It's the same basic concept we're talking about, where we've got a voluntary response that we're controlling what's happening, whereas involuntary, these are things that are basically going to happen without us consciously thinking about that process. Hand movements, intentional hand movements allow you to interact with your environment, to perform tasks, whereas you've got reflexive withdrawal. That's that reflex that we've talked about it before, where you reach out, you touch a hot pan, and immediately let it go because your system has learned, and we don't have to actually consciously think about this reflex action to protect us from harm. And then, of course, we've got the glandular responses, things like salivation, sweating, that'll help maintain homeostasis. And think about it. You start thinking about food, or you smell some sort of food that really smells appealing to you, and your mouth starts to the saliva starts running in your mouth, and what it's doing is it's starting to get your system ready to take in that food that it is pretty sure it's going to get. So if we look at it, we can look at how sensation, integration, and motor response coordinate for effective survival. Kind of gives us that seamless flow from stimulus detection to the action. So just kind of summarizing how this all works together. So the SIM pathway, we have our sensory input reception. The sense organs detect an external stimuli, send the signals to the central nervous system. Central nervous system pulls that information in, and as quickly as it can, it kind of looks for patterns. It looks to see if this is something we've seen before or it's something new, and how do we need to handle this. But it does it really quickly. And then it sends a signal back out through the motor response activation to carry the information to a destination, ensuring protection from potential harm, ensuring that the body is responding to whatever the stimulus was in an appropriate manner, hopefully. So, real life examples, if you touch a hot stove, that pain receptor in the skin detects the heat. They send a signal to the central nervous system. Central nervous system really quickly interprets that it's dangerous and it wants to protect you, so it sends a signal through the rapid motor response that says, pull your hand away from the hot surface. So it's really critical that these coordinate and function, sensation, integration, motor response, that enables the organism to perceive, interpret, react to effectively to their environment, ensuring survival and well-being. We've got to be able to sense, we've got to be able to process as quickly as possible and get that answer, that response back to the system as quickly as we can.